I was playing on a console in my parents' bedroom, on a Formula One racing game, at a crucial point in the race when my father told me to stop. Stop? Stop now? Stop at this crucial point? I decided to reason with him, to explain to him the significance of where I was in the game, to explain to him how important it was that I could finish what I'd started, to explain that pausing the game would risk overheating the console and that there'd be a danger that I wouldn't be able to get back in the zone when I resumed. At least that's what I wish I'd done. Instead, I decided to try out a new phrase, a phrase I'd heard from some of the older kids at school, some of the cooler kids, a two-word phrase that expressed my dissatisfaction with what it was that he was suggesting, that clearly described the fact that I did not agree with what he said. I didn't quite understand the emotional impact of those two words that I was about to utter. Not until I said them, at least. And then the shouting started. Something about getting out of the room and going to my room immediately. Something about how I would never use that kind of language again. Perhaps words like grounded were bandied about. My father is a calm, rational, fair, reasonable man. But I was terrified. It was something about his reaction that was so shocking, so surprising. I learned then that what I had done was wrong. I learned that it was not okay and it was not good. And I swear to you, I never said the F word to my father again. I wonder how you learnt it. Not that word, not any word, but I wonder how you learnt what was right and what was wrong. I wonder how you came to understand what was good and what was not. Maybe you can remember moments like that one, snapshots in time. Maybe you got caught speeding. Maybe you got told off by a teacher when you were a student or recently. Maybe you did something that you deeply regret. Maybe you can't pick out specific moments. And actually, this stuff doesn't develop in an instant, does it? It develops over time. It is not a collection of snapshots. But how do we develop moral reasoning? How do we come to understand what is right and what is wrong? And what happens if we don't? I have a confession to make today. I am not primarily an educator. I am not a teacher or a lecturer. Education is not my primary vocation. I'm a psychiatrist. That's right, I have one of those jobs that makes people look at you a bit funny. But it's okay, don't worry, because I am analyzing you. I work in forensic neurodevelopmental psychiatry, which I think sounds really exciting. I think it sounds like I run around chasing and analyzing criminals and helping to catch them. Does anyone remember Waking the Dead? It was a TV show. It's on Netflix or something. But that's not what I do. I work in an inpatient secure unit for people with learning disabilities, autistic spectrum conditions, or both. And most of our patients have had some involvement with the criminal justice system. Many of them are in our care instead of being in prison. So I'm fascinated by this question of how we develop moral reasoning, how moral decision-making develops in our lives. Because what's striking is that the people that I work with are not bad people. They are warm, friendly, fun, and yet they have done things that are shockingly wrong. In the 4.5 years that I've been working in this area, I have worked with people who, when you spend time with them, are absolutely fine, but under stress or pressure have done things that the rest of society would consider completely unacceptable. Where does that come from? What happens? I've also seen, though, that when we intentionally teach moral reasoning to the people that we work with, the effect, the impact is significant. People go from having a pro-criminal, antisocial attitude to having a pro-social, positive view of themselves and the world. And I wonder if we're leaving it too late if we wait until people come into forensic services before we teach them this stuff. Should we teach moral reasoning sooner? Should we teach it more widely? But to answer that question, I want to look a little bit at where our understanding of morality comes from. There are many models that might help us to do this, but probably one of the most well-known and most established, the foundational one for this whole area, was developed by a person called Kohlberg, who put out 6 stages of moral development, who explained that as we age, as we go through maturity, we go from a moral understanding that is very much based on meeting our own needs to an understanding of morality based in the social consensus. And one stage particularly is significant as we go from stage 2 to stage 3. As we go from a stage which is defined by a what's in it for me approach to a stage that is more about the golden rule of treating others as you would want to be treated yourself. But what's interesting is that progress does not always happen. And there are many reasons why it may not occur. For some people, it may be that it doesn't occur because of an intellectual disability or problems with perspective taking or a misunderstanding of social cues. For others, it's because the environment that they grow up in do not provide the circumstances for ongoing moral development. And Kohlberg himself talked about the fact that the more sociable the environment, the faster we develop morally. Others, like John C. Gibbs, have talked about the fact that if people grow up in an environment where there is neglect or abuse, they are primed to develop antisocial attitudes. That actually the circumstances that we grow up in have a key role in our moral development. We've seen that in my own life, how with the nurturing support of my parents and their gentle guidance when I went astray, I learned moral reasoning. Imagine if you don't have that input. Actually, you probably don't have to imagine it. You've probably seen it. You've probably seen it in some of your students. You probably rub shoulders with people who have not had that background and that nurture and developed. I was talking to one of my colleagues very recently, about one of our patients and about how the pattern of abuse and neglect that he suffered in his early life so clearly shaped the offending behavior that occurred later on. So what we've done where we work is that we run a course that intentionally teaches moral reasoning. That doesn't expect people to catch it just by default, but by design. We have a course that helps people to catch it and to understand it. That provides the environment in which they can learn it. It's a course called Equip that runs in a 12-week program, 4 days a week for about an hour a day. And it covers things like social skills, like moral judgment, anger management, all in the context of mutual support and encouragement, that addresses some of the key problems that lead to antisocial behavior. It covers things like thinking errors, mistakes in the way that we perceive ourselves or the world. Things like thinking the worst, which is when we assume the worst possible outcome of people or situations. Or blaming others, which is when we ascribe our negative attitudes or the things that we do and we say that they are someone else's responsibility or they are someone else's fault. It also teaches things like coping skills, about the way to deal with stressful situations, about not becoming the clown in the ring. And there is a picture here of someone taunting us like a clown in a ring, and we have a decision as to whether we step into the ring with them and become a clown ourselves or cut the strings and step away. As you can hear, there is a common language that develops, a language that endures through people's progress. And I've seen the impact as we've taught this. I've seen what happens as people have taken these principles on board, how they have moved very quickly from the disordered environment in our admissions wards on into a rehab context and out into the community. I've seen how the lights have come on as people have discovered a different way of living. I've seen people for whom even in the midst of a very severe relapse of their mental illness have held on to these principles. I've seen how they have prevented much harm in people's lives. But I wonder about our approach if we only teach it in forensic services, I wonder if we're missing the boat. I wonder what would happen if we taught it earlier. Because what we do is reactive. It is treatment. Could we take a prophylactic approach? Could we be proactive? Could we teach this stuff in schools or everywhere else? Could we make it so that a child, regardless of their upbringing, regardless of whether they're in an environment where they catch this stuff, will experience it for certain? That if it isn't at home, that they will experience it at school? Can we help those who have missed out to catch up? Can we intentionally teach it? Not just to say that, oh, well, the environment of our school is such that they are going to pick up on it, because if they're already heading in an antisocial direction, they're not going to engage with the environment of the school. What if we taught this stuff by design? What if we taught it by intention? What if we found a way to teach a different way of living, a different way of thinking, a different way to view the world? Now, I'm not naive. I know that we've heard about a lot of ideas today, hundreds of ideas, hundreds of brilliant ideas, and many of them are going to be much easier to implement than this. But the impact, if we could do it, would be so significant. How could it be possible in your context? Is there a way that you could teach moral reasoning in your school or your organization? Maybe it's something that could happen in form time. Maybe it could be a set block. Maybe you could just take some of the difficult, disengaged students and run a program like the one we use with them. Maybe you want to try it out with your staff team. Maybe there's an organization that you work in that's not in mainstream education, but where you could help people to move forward in this area. I know that it would take a lot of energy and effort. I know that it would take a lot of thought. I know that exams are looming, and we've heard this afternoon about all the different boxes that need to be ticked. But it strikes me that if we could do this along with teaching certain subjects, that moral reasoning would set each and every one of our students up to win in life. If we could teach moral reasoning by design, not by default. If we no longer left it to chance and circumstance whether or not kids picked up this stuff, what difference could we make in our world? I believe that moral reasoning is too important to be left to chance and circumstance. I've seen the worst case scenarios of the times when it goes wrong. And I believe that if we could find a way to intentionally teach this stuff in our context, we would see happier students, more successful schools, a safer society, and best case scenario, we can make our world a better place. Thanks very much.